sit back in your seats, get something to eat, and watch this movie. Don't let the kiddies see it, because, well, we'll let you hear the beginning first. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Left of the Projector. I am your host Evan, back again with another film discussion from the left. You can follow and support the show on Patreon at Left of the Projector Pod. This week on the show, I have a little bit of a different type of episode. Last October, I attended several days of the Brooklyn Horror Festival and was fortunate enough to get to see one of the premieres of the film Lilly Lives Alone, directed by Martin Melnick. The film will be out on Dark Sky Films, and you may have already seen my initial reactions back in October on Patreon. I am really excited to have on the show today Martin Melnick, who wrote and directed the film alongside Shannon, Beeby, who plays the star role of Lily, and Ryan Jones, who is also in the film and happens to also be married to Shannon. So I'm excited to bring them on and hope you enjoy our discussion on the film Lily Lives Alone.
Well, I'm Martin Melnick. I wrote and directed Lilly Lives Alone.
I'm Shannon Beeby, and I play Lily.
I'm Ryan Jones. I'm the other half, less half of...
No, not.
I play Jed.
Awesome. Well, sometimes I like to start off the show kind of with maybe like a kind of a little icebreaker, maybe separate from the conversation. And so I'm curious if there is something, a film or a book or something you've, consumed recently that, maybe you want to recommend. And I guess a bonus point if it somehow relates to Lily Lives Alone, though no pressure if it does or doesn't, just kind of, what you're listening to, watching, reading, anything like that.
Do you all want to start?
You go ahead.
Yeah.
I can tell you got an answer.
Please.
I mean, a lot. I don't know about anything specifically recently. We've talked about some of the films that have sort of inspired the movie quite a bit. I think Evan, you and I have talked about like Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure and Pulse and a lot of the sort of underlying dread to that sort of style of cinema that's definitely pretty prevalent. It's I wouldn't want to say necessarily like an inspiration, but it is definitely like something I gravitate towards. So it's something that's featured prominently in Lily Lives Alone, is that sense of sort of foreboding dread. And there's other films recently too, but that one kind of comes to mind.
So I really don't have an immediate recommendation that I could say would parallel or that I would that has a lot of overlap with themes with Lily Lives Alone. Honestly, what I'm listening to right now is the podcast from Jonathan from Queer Eye. He does the like Getting Better series. And I just love his very honest journey through self-embetterment. And it's like really empowering and curious. I think the podcast before was like Getting Curious, but now it's Getting Better. Sorry, that's like what I've been listening to lately.
No, that's totally fair.
Yeah. I really am going blank on this. Maybe come back to it at the end, and I might have something, because I'm like going through the file cabinet and I'm like, nah, I don't know if that really applies.
I have a ton of things that I just like or that I...
Yeah, I mean, that's also fair too. It doesn't, I mean, I guess maybe the wrench that I threw in there was it had to somehow relate. Maybe that makes it harder maybe.
One thing that we did, this isn't an inspiration for the story or for any of the like character elements of Lily really, but I do remember when Ryan and Shannon, who stayed with Sarah, my wife who produced the film, stayed with us during production, in order to sort of nail the almost unplaceable like rural Oregon, Pacific Northwest accent, we watched Green Room together.
Yes.
The thing about Green Room is the story obviously has nothing to do with Lily, but there is something about this this rural Pacific Northwest forest accent that isn't really talked about, because everyone usually says, everyone in the Pacific Northwest has like a non-regional dialect, and it's really not true. It's just very buried and subtle, and often certain words come out and certain slowdowns come out. And so I do remember, I have a fond memory of us sitting down to watch that right before, just because, I've got 2 stars from the East Coast, and I'm trying to explain that there's this weird, like, indescribable drawl that happens when you live somewhere in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Northwest. So it just comes to mind.
Yeah, yeah, totally. That was such a great memory. Like in the movie theater, in the home cinema room, and just talking film and getting into the headspace too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still don't think I got the accent right.
No, I don't think either. No.
I think you did better than you think.
Okay.
Well, I had a question maybe I'll pause this one for a second, because you both kind of were talking about getting into like the headspace of doing the movie. For like, I guess for you, Ryan and Shannon, like, how did you maybe come into the project? And as you were, had you read the script and were getting into your characters, like, what was that process like for you? And how did it, I guess, materialize from your side of things?
Yeah, so Martin reached out and gave us the screenplay, so we were able to read it beforehand. And I would say the preparation process was a lot of, for me personally, like memory building. So like for Lily's background, creating specific memories and trying to make them very visceral for myself. And then otherwise it's just moment by moment piecing through the physical. I mean, it has a lot to do with like how you feel physically in your body from one moment to the next, and what your like psychological pinches are from one moment to the next, like during the journey of the film itself. So like it was me just kind of like breaking down this script in that way, but a lot of it in equal measure is pulling from those like past kind of like created memories for myself.
Yeah, totally. I remember just running lines in bed, going to sleep, and just saying the words, not really just getting things memorized, and to be really comfortable with the dialogue to begin with. But then once we got in, and this was we don't always have this luxury shooting on a film, is that we came in a week before, and Martin took us to the location, and I think we actually did like a good like a half day of like a blocking rehearsal for. Did we do like?
We did almost the whole thing. So everything with YouTube.
Yeah.
We were fortunate that the art team had already fully decked and built out the house. So essentially it was like a still life of Lily's environment, but empty with no one there, which was very cool and kind of surreal. So we were able to kind of go through, and honestly, just every scene that you were in, we basically did a mock run. And I it really got
so helpful.
Familiar with that space, which was great.
Yeah, that helped. I mean, just like something like that, just getting into that environment, and it just kind of like drops you. And it's kind of like when you put on like a character's like shoes or something, or like their clothes. It was just getting into the space. That I remember that being really helpful.
And shout out just to the art team that the
seriously
space was so filled. Like honestly, we show a lot of it in the film, but because so much is shot in shadow, you don't really get a full sense for just how detailed the location was. Everything down to books that are chosen and little things that are in corners that you're never going to really be able to see. So just being in that space really did it, but it does a lot for the actors. So I mean, it does a lot for people having to live in that space. So really, really amazing.
For sure.
Yeah.
And were you, Martin, when you were sort of, maybe my question was before that was kind of how you, were, when you were writing and imagining this film, like how much of those ideas did you have kind of from maybe not from the first inception of the idea, but like as you were putting the film together and the script and everything, like how did that all come together and become realized?
The story or the location?
Yeah, I guess the story even. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've said this once or twice before, but the inception of this was really a challenge from my wife who produced it, because we have some other scripts that are a little bit bigger, a little bit more costly. And they're ones we want to do, but we didn't want to do them. We didn't want to have to compromise what the perspective of those is supposed to be. So she kind of challenged me to say, she said, can you want to write, we could fund something. Do you want to try to write something that's just two people in a room, be clever about it? And I was like, oh, I love that challenge. And I missed that mark a lot because it ended up being like 6 people in a house and a grocery store and a few places. But the sentiment was there. It was more honed in than I usually am. So it started with that. It was like, okay, so what's a great story we could tell in a small space with not no resources, but limited resources. And that was, well, we can tell a ghost movie. We can tell a personal movie about a character, going through some sort of transformation or going through some sort of adversity. And we can tell that cleverly in shadow. And we can tell that with ghosts. And we can tell that with psychological disturbances and delusions and surrealism. And how can we put that all together into a cohesive story that really says something? And, the thing about that is that doesn't really, it needs a budget, but it doesn't need the budget to be able to do something that's that contained. So it was really just a clever challenge by my wife and producer. And it kind of led to me like really focusing on what I think was important, which is developing Lilly as a character and her journey specifically. So it sort of came out of a challenge that way.
Wow, that's quite a challenge. But to put together such a film, as you said at the beginning, sort of one that has this constant dread. I think when I first saw it the first time at in Brooklyn Horror Festival, the first thing that I thought of after I came out was sort of like the Hitchcockian sort of idea of like the bomb under the table, like something that's slowly, something that's going to happen, but you don't know what it is. You're kind of constantly waiting. There's definitely moments like early on when Lilly is in the kitchen several times. Like every time I see a sink with something inside of it, that always, for some reason that just makes me very uncomfortable. I don't know what it is, but how did you like help build all of those sort of moments throughout it? And then I guess for you both to kind of bring that to light in feeling the dread, but obviously you're showing the audience that there's something going on, but you may not be aware of what it is as it's happening.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
It was pretty important for us throughout the course of the film that the movie is really shot from Lily's perspective. Like you realize in parts what the narration really is, and in that regard, some things you're going to realize later, and some things you're going to be confused about when they're happening, and then they reveal themselves later. But like the idea being that like the sort of dread is built from this unknown that's happening all around you. It's sort of like this really claustrophobic feeling.
Yeah, I would say for Lily doesn't really trust her own experience. So she's really like from the start of the film is coming from a pretty long track record of dealing with that mistrust internally. So I think a lot of that for her, or like over the course of the film, is her experiencing these things and in a sense being like, yeah, this is just more of what I'm used to having to deal with, but is it getting worse? Am I getting worse? Like, is this actually real this time? Like, can I trust myself? Am I creating this in my own mind? Yeah.
Yeah, and even it's funny because I never really had thought about this until now, but it's similar with Jed too, because there's things where Jed's like, wait, did I see that? Did I hear that? And I'm I to a lesser extent than Lily, of course, but like that, I think putting the pieces together, I think was, and kind of like that where you're creeped out, like you're saying, like with the sink, but then you kind of become obsessed with it. It's almost like the thing. Then you're drawn to it. Be like, wait, what? Yeah, I need to know more about this. And I think that was kind of like Jed's journey, without giving too many details away.
That's good.
Yeah, and especially in that scene too, you're often you're looking at the character and what they're doing, but then there's also things that are happening, in the periphery of those scenes where you think you see something, you don't know what you're seeing. And was that like a challenge to create those moments, as directing it, like making it, as the viewer, kind of wandering like, oh, something going to happen over there. Like nothing does happen, but you're constantly, as a viewer, waiting for something to.
Yeah, I think it was really important for us to sort of craft the paranoia that Lily is going through. She's in a sort of state of protective desperation at different points. So she's getting a little bit, the anxiety is taking over, and without like going, it gets bigger. But starting at that out, I really wanted it to feel like what it feels like to I don't know, to have some sort of neuroses about what's around you, to have some sort of just this constant state of anxiety, I guess. So, having things hidden in the corners. I've talked to people who have watched it, even in festivals, and didn't see that there's, we have some ghosts hidden in the background of this movie. So there are moments where there's a figure in the background or a hand or something that you could easily miss in the first watch, and then you see it again. But they're all stacked in there so that there's a point where you're watching it and you're really, feeling like Lily, like you're being watched constantly. And all these things are reinforced by some of the production design. There's, owls with eyes all over the set. There's, as you know, there's characters looming outside. So there's all this constant threat, and it's sort of an internal and external threat for Lily the whole time.
Yeah, the thing also that maybe that's kind of maybe somewhat related to the paranoia was, at least I was struck the second time that I watched it just a couple nights ago, is the pain. Obviously you understand that Lily is in some kind of pain, and she's drinking and she's taking medication and all these things that are to kind of maybe cope with this. But the thing that I didn't notice as much of this until this time was that it seems like that Jed's character is also in some kind of pain, but it's maybe not as pronounced, and it kind of gets, without giving anything away, sort of changes as the film is going. So I'm wondering how you were able to, the pain like seems to maybe get, more pronounced as the film is moving on, and how you were able to both blur the lines of like this reality and sort of dream state and paranoia with like this underlying pain that you're maybe feeling.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. Yeah. With Jed, it, a lot of that was just in the writing too. I think the writing and the direction, because, I think that, yeah, I mean, I really didn't, that's really interesting. Yeah. Thinking of, because I guess Jed is in pain. It's kind of like started feeling more for him. In the first, at the beginning, I was kind of like, oh, this guy's a douchebag, kind of like, and which like it's the first thing you shouldn't do as an actor, to judge your character. Let's just say, but there was, there were elements of that it was like, okay. But there was definitely, I think, more there in the writing, and to Martin's credit, like, really, I didn't want to give us, speak for you, but like too much information to get into your head about the character, and like, okay, this is the journey. It's just, rather than just like, okay, just be present, and then go through the journey, and then that change happens. But
yeah,
what do you think?
I think Ryan undersells himself a lot in that.
Yeah.
But, because you brought a lot of nuance to the role, but I appreciate that. But yeah, no, just to sort of elaborate on that is, I think the biggest takeaway about those aspects of all the supporting role is, we're focused on Lily, but the more you watch it, the more you realize that everyone in her periphery, everyone, including the neighbors, including Russell, everyone has had some sort of pain. I think one of the lines that's quoted to me most is one from Combs, and it's his performance of Russell, and it's, "You don't own sadness, you don't own despair." The reality of it is that all of these characters are living on the same block, so they're all, or Jed might live a little elsewhere, but he's in the same part of town. He's spending his same time with Lily. Everyone is sort of from the same socioeconomic background. They're all living in a rural place that doesn't seem to have a whole lot of opportunity. So, even though everyone's a little bit different, they've all had a similar isolating isolating set of circumstances for where they're at. So, you can just assume various forms of trauma for all of them and or different experiences. And that was kind of important to all of us when we were working on this movie. And Shannon, you've talked about this in other interviews about just installing empathy for our characters. And that one of the biggest things we didn't want to do while making a movie about a character going through something like this is punch down or judge the character. Because Lily makes decisions based on not having a whole lot of options. Her circumstances don't give her a lot of choices. And yeah, sometimes she makes awful decisions, but it's very easy to sit back from a comfortable position and judge someone for making an awful decision when you have no idea that if you were in the same set of circumstances and had limited choices that you wouldn't make some similar, as anyone would make some similar decisions. So yeah, that was kind of important that all these characters, like you said, you watched again, you realize Jed's in pain. His is a little more subtle because you kind of only learn it in the small, you're not sitting with him as long as you're sitting with Lily in the movie. But yeah, it's a great observation because that conversation, I don't want to give too much away, but the conversation they have about what he's done and his past and how he sees people and their decisions, it really illuminates a lot about what everyone's going through. And you kind of piece together that this isn't just a film about one person. It's a film about people and in isolation. What happens when you don't have community?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one big observation and question I was going to get to, and you kind of talked about it. Some of that, Martin, was the idea of community and the kind of this. I mean, especially being that it's in the Pacific Northwest, and you kind of have this paranoia that's amongst all of them. You see, like Russell seems paranoid, like even the neighbors kind of have their own kind of things going on, and it seems like everyone is disconnected but trying to be connected to one another, but they can't. And at the same time, you have Lily wanting to leave. We learn things about her family and these different things, and so I'm just curious more about how you built some of those, kind of small side characters, but give a lot of extra information. And you mentioned a quote that I was gonna bring up, that you don't own sadness, you don't own despair. Life is hard for everyone, and I think that's kind of a common thread. It's just that if you had a movie that was about Russell, you might have learned so many more things about him. But this movie is about Lily, and so you learn her pain, what she's going through in this, approximately a day or so. So it's I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Yeah, it very much, we could have picked a thread to follow any of the other characters, and honestly, I have a script for one of the other characters as well. But yeah, no, it's true. It was really important for me that everyone felt three-dimensional and real because they're all going through it, and we just happen to learn a little bit about them because we're focusing on Lily this time. But it really informs a bigger picture, like you're saying, about everybody. And yeah, the neighbors outside. One of my favorite aspects of the movie is you don't really realize how much are people trying to connect, like you said, trying to reach out to each other. They're trying to build community around Lily, and it's not necessarily that she won't let them in, but just that the circumstances don't allow for trust in this particular situation. It's really just a sort of tragic situation.
And literally not let them in, like, to her home, not just figuratively. I don't know which one you meant, but I kind of think of it as both. Like, she doesn't want to let them in emotionally or physically. I don't know how you, like, Lily, like, connected to in the moments you do talk to the neighbors, and I guess also to bring in your coworker Claire as well, and kind of the relationships there. I'm like, how did that build? Is you have a couple scenes, you have one in the you have a couple, you're not, it's kind of maybe unclear the chronological order of things necessarily, but I'm wondering how you built some of those maybe smaller, how you built some of the rapport with some of the smaller roles in there, like how that helped feed the character of Lily and like maybe ground her in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Claire, is played by Erin. Oh my gosh, what's Erin's last name?
Right.
Okay, thank you, Erin. Yay. Just to be honest, like the biggest testament is to what in an incredible actor and kind-hearted, warm, grounded person that she is. And so even though we didn't spend a lot of time with one another, like prior to filming or even it, but it was it was quick, and I think we both dropped in very easily with one another since our characters are so close as friends. And so it made it kind of a breeze, like kind of like I have two sisters, so Shannon in real life, and to me it felt like that sort of like really familiar, like dropped in comfort level. So and I'm really grateful for that because uh, their relationship called for that, and so it was just like, oh wow, when you kind of hit the the jackpot, or win the co-star lottery, so that was really wonderful.
Did you? Oh, and I guess the other thing about that I noticed about Claire this time more is that, I mean, it's interesting you say that it's almost like a sister, because their relationship almost feels like that, where they have this sort of rapport, and they're very, she comes in, comes and checks on Lily in the night, and clearly has her own life and her own things and her own pain and her own problem, but she's willing to do this. But there's breaking points for her, and probably the same way you might have with your own family, or something like that.
Like I've seen the conversations her with her sister. So yeah, it was like,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I mean,
Well, no.
not exactly.
There's calls in the middle of the night.
Yeah, right. I'm hallucinating again. No, yeah.
And this is, maybe this is also for Martin, because I know we briefly talked a little bit about this, but as as being a parent myself, and also having had lost one of my parents almost 10 years ago now, not necessarily recently, that's sort of like one of the themes that you kind of uncover as the film progresses, sort of learn about Lily's family and her parents, and the kind of the initial kind of thing you learn at the beginning of the film is sort of this tragedy of the loss of her child 10 years ago. And you're not really given a lot of information. It's kind of slowly, things are kind of unpeeled a little bit. And I'm curious, Martin, if you borrowed or if these kind of ideas of loss and kind of the parents and, and those kind of things were personal in nature, or if this was simply something that just kind of built Lily's character in a way that just, kind of made sense. Because I often think of like horror movies in general, and the way that makes good ones so good is that they're both grounded in kind of personal experiences, but also mirror and mask like current events and things that are happening, that makes it, will be evergreen. You can watch it now or in 10 years and it still has that sort of relevance.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the construction of Lily and the loss and those themes, it's a combination of personal experiences from myself, from my wife, who heavily helped me develop the story, her personal experiences, some close friends' personal experiences, and then just familial experiences. So not any one experience, but one of the sort of common themes that my wife and I have discussed is this. And this was where I think we deviate from traditional grief and trauma horror, is that the movie focuses a little bit on this concept of parentification, this idea, and Lily talks about it, where you never really got to have a childhood because you were expected to essentially raise yourself, and then even beyond that, maybe even be a caregiver for your parent. And that's sort of alluded to with her relationship with her father. And I don't want to spoil things too much, because there's some stuff that really comes out while you watch the film. But it's really important that we dissected things that aren't really just talked about. A lot of people will say, well, this thing means you lost somebody, and that is sad and that's awful, and those are important stories to talk about too. But this was something that we wanted to discuss that was, I feel like, a little bit more complicated and less explored, which is this idea of a maternal cycle, where maybe you have this inherent desire to try to be a parent again, because be the parent you never had yourself, but you weren't really given that opportunity, or you weren't taught or given the tools to do so. And then what happens if you finally got that opportunity and you messed it up because you didn't have those tools? And what would that do to your sort of sense of being, your sense of self-worth even further, because of this sort of generational cycle of trauma that you've experienced as a child? And so, like, discussing those ideas, like a digestible way where it's slowly revealed to you and information about the character in the story was really important. and that's stuff that we've talked about. It's stuff that is personal between my wife, myself, and other family members. And then I've talked on other interviews about addiction, alcohol addictions in particular, and that's very personal to me. And just that also, I've lost a family member to that, and someone who's very close to me. So it's just there's a culmination of things, and they sort of came together as we were really focusing on developing Lily and making her three-dimensional, and like as her story just evolved, like all those things sort of kind of came together.
Was it challenging for you, Shannon, to take on, I don't know, that like all of that it's a lot to take on as a character, all this, and you mentioned at the beginning sort of like you're kind of preparing using these different memories and memory building of things that necessarily aren't revealed in the film, but are ways to like build this character. So was that difficult to, formulate this background and then having it, what you actually see on the screen, like come out, very vividly, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely challenges that you have to navigate as a person, being an actor and then convincing your own body and cells that this is the experience you're having. So I would say that it's a challenge, and it's not necessarily one that it's like you would want to immerse your body in for like a long period of time for like many months or anything. But it was the type of challenge that if you're wired this way, you can find it really enjoyable. Like I enjoyed it. I think there's something about accepting those challenges I feel like it's the same reason, it was something I mentioned prior, but it's like why people like run marathons or climb mountains or do ice baths, there's something about like doing something and knowing that you can go all the way there and come out on the other side and you're alive. And it makes you appreciate being alive and like the life you've been given even more in those moments, those like tiny, precious, sometimes the moments that can feel like they can get lost, but they're just very simple. Like, wow, that cup of tea was like perfectly hot. And you're like, oh, that's so beautiful. Or like those simple pleasures really come through all the more. So
that care package that Martin's mom
yes
gave us.
Gosh, this is amazing.
Like in the evening, it was a lot of self-soothing.
It was, and that was
in the evenings.
That was so, and really like key and like very helpful. And so going from it was like every day taking an ice plunge or something, but like the best way possible. I love cold plunges. So
you needed that decompression in the evenings after it is true. It was like, I mean, like you said, it's enjoyable, but it was really hard. I mean, you went to some dark places for this movie, and I could even witness the toll that it was taking, over time. Like, you didn't stop you from being wonderful, but like I could just see how hard it was, and all the more that I applaud working with you, just because it was. You didn't let anything like that stop you. You kept forging forward. You carried Lily so strongly, and
thank you.
Really important. Lily Lily is not an easy character.
You created a bit of a gauntlet for her.
Back in time when I called you up and said I've got a script to show you. It'll be a lighthearted comedy for you.
It's basically like the emotional Iron Man. Can you how do you feel about that? Sounds good.
Was for you, Ryan, what was it like to maybe see Shannon in this role? Like, during the day, I guess you could say, like during the filming, and then having to like flip the switch in some way. Was it like, what was it like from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that there was a I did take it upon myself as to to kind of be like a like like a what are the I don't know why I'm going blank, but the it's like an animal that's there to like
Like a
Emotional
support, emotional support.
Yeah, like an emotional support animal, yeah. And definitely in kind of the evenings, just like reminding one another that to walk away from that. It's like, okay, creating that division, because it is I've never had a role like like that. Like, I mean, it was fully immersed in just extreme emotional places. And yeah, I try to do my best. Like, I there were several days I didn't go on the set, but I was back at the house. And so I would try to find ways like, let me start dinner or something. Like, they're all going to come, come back. And so, yeah, I was aware of that, of like, that was my other role in the film. That's a great question, Dylan.
Playing two roles.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I can't tell you how much Ryan playing that other role, and so generously and patiently and lovingly, made all the difference to, like, thank you, Martin, and to my ability to, like, maintain my stamina through that. It 100% made all the difference, because it's like, you have that safe place to hop back and forth from, and that was really, really important. Very, very helpful.
Yeah, I just didn't want her to lose her mind. I was like, I want my wife back.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah.
I'm not a monster here.
No, I mean, it's not that. It's it's literally the where she had to be.
It was cathartic.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you even said that too. Like, it was a catharsis. And I mean, when you guys did Circle together, so this was a short film that Martin and Shannon was in, and it was like, there were similar, I think.
Yeah, but not
places
nearly.
that you had to go to.
Yeah, but I would say
Shallow end of the pool, sort of.
Yeah, that was the
yeah.
Circle's actually featured in Lilly Lives Alone. So that little clip on the TV that she's watching is actually from a short that Shannon and I did in 2018 that actually also screened at Brooklyn Horror, which is kind of a fun little Easter egg. But originally we were like, oh, maybe we'd film something specifically for it, but it actually worked out perfect that we could hide this project that we did together. That was sort of the start of our director-actor relationship that way.
Yeah,
I did wonder that, because I was watching, I'm like, that's also you on the film. Like, what did you film that for this? And so that answers my curiosity of that. That's a nice little touch. So completely unrelated, this is maybe more just like as part of the whole film, and you and I briefly were exchanging a couple messages about some of the kind of like religious symbolism in the film. And I know that from like one of the opening scenes where Jed and Lily are talking about the the Christianity and like being a Christian, and it kind of pops up throughout, and little bits here and there kind of sprinkled in. But I'm wondering how you wanted to play with sort of this religious aspect to it, and how that led to, or if it did lead to, any of how the script, or kind of how you constructed the film. And then even, I guess, the roles too, like, was that part of the mindset of, Jed and Lily as these maybe two opposite versions of, views on religion?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think for me, from a story element, I really like steeping my stories in mythology. I think there's a reason why they stand the test of time, and spirituality as well. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I do really respect the way that stories like those stand the test of time in a lot of ways. That short film we talked about, Circle, is a modernization of Orpheus and Eurydice, which is the same story as Lot and his wife. And it's actually, there's like 3 or 4 older iterations of it too. And just knowing that, like, there are human truths to a lot of these stories, and that's why they're continuously retold. And it's not that anything like that is specifically happening in Lily, but without giving anything away about the ending, there's a lot of like iconography that I've definitely pulled from, mostly from like things like Renaissance paintings and some pre-Enlightenment paintings and things like that that really sort of hit home this idea that that, like you said earlier, that this is like a timeless story. And I guess that like the one of the reasons why the time period is so sort of enigmatic or like hard to pin down in this movie is that I really wanted, like, if you wanted, I mean, obviously there are elements like clothing and stuff, but if you wanted to show this movie 20 years earlier or 20 years later, that it might still resonate in some way because there are some of these like universal truths in it. And I liked the idea of bringing some of that visual aspect into the movie. And of course, the discussion you mentioned about like her and Lily and Jed talking about matter, and him talking about how if you just sort of give up this idea that everything is just this cold matter in, matter out, that you're sort of also giving up on something. So like they both have a different perspective. They both, and as you mentioned about the pain, and they have this conversation later in the movie that they're both in pain, but they're both finding different like intellectual ways to cope with it. I think that's the fundamental difference between Jed and Lily in those moments is they both have different kinds of pain and they're both coping and understanding the world differently because of that pain. So their conversation where Lily is sort of a little colder about that and seeing things more calculated because that's a defense mechanism for her, and Jed is seeing it from a more, maybe at that point, maybe a more humanistic perspective, a more spiritual perspective, possibly. That's some of that push and pull, and it kind of, I guess I'm talking so much, so I apologize, but I guess it is kind of this like that conversation I think is like part of the whole movie. Is how do we find different ways to live with ourselves, and all people go through things, but we all handle finding a way to live with ourselves differently, and so that is some of that conversation. And so yeah, that's all reinforced by some of the mythology and some of the iconography that we've kind of sparsed or placed sparsely in there. Sorry, that was long-winded.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah.
Then how did that play for you both as in your roles of sort of, I guess maybe it's like building, that character you have, your background, was that part of your thought process on, the religious aspect, or did that kind of not play as much into it?
I think Lily is well. So I definitely with Lily was working with layers on her own interpretation, or yeah, her interpretation of her own spiritual beliefs, because throughout the journey of the film, she reveals. Um, I don't know what all I can say, but yeah, that I think that, like Martin was saying, there is definitely defense mechanisms at play, and so I think that I had to know what was underneath that, what I was being defensive of, what was that like soft underbelly that may have had more um, hopeful beliefs. And there was a time probably in Lily's life where that would have, if she had been asked those questions by Jed much earlier on, she could have maybe answered them differently. But at the moment that we meet her at the start of the film, those defense mechanisms are definitely like strong, and the walls have been built, and she's like pretty convinced that they are the only thing keeping her safe in the world. So uh, yeah, I guess it was kind of like being able to be aware of what was underneath that at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think like that was definitely, I think, a part of like building Jed, his beliefs, and I wouldn't say like Jed was like a fundamental Christian or anything, but definitely kind of, I think, which we see, sometimes I think in rural parts too, like kind of maybe, kind of like falling into and adopting kind of like Christian views, or just like the Bible is, if there was like a book, like Jed didn't read the Bible per se, but like his parents, he references both of his parents who have passed, kind of, they were good people, read the Bible, that kind of thing. And I think what Lily brings up is something actually that for me myself that I've wondered, just like what is our place in this world, this universe? Are we just animated atoms? Okay, but if we are, then is that a bad thing? I mean, is there something more to that? Do we, are we going somewhere else, and are we going to be conscious of like of of this life, and or like who we are? Like, are we going to have some concept of identity when we're not in these bodies anymore, or is it just like it's just there are no it's lights out? And I think Jed definitely takes the wants to believe in something, that there is something better than the life that he was living, which, as Martin was saying earlier, was like there was a lot of, there was pain, there was he was trapped in many ways. And so um, yeah, I really enjoyed that juxtaposition of their views.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of like trapped, it seemed like all of the characters feel trapped in this town too, and you could also then say that Lily is trapped, in her home, and like she obviously she goes to work and she has her job, but they have these, especially these like gorgeous shots above with like the fog and the mist, and just kind of like everything seems to be underneath there, and you can't see what's going on. It's just that the kind of the feeling I got. So, I mean, how did that play into your writing this, Martin? I guess too is making everything is very you only have a couple locations, which may have been for other reasons, but that makes the story almost more compelling to me, is that you have these single locations, couple locations, and no one can leave. Everyone is kind of like trapped. Like Jed leaves, he comes, but he returns, and you have these moments of everyone not being able to maybe do what they want.
Absolutely. I mean, that was always the plan, was this sort of contained space. Originally, it was placed in a double wide trailer in a sort of really secluded trailer park in the woods. So originally, it was even more contained. We just, for logistic reasons, couldn't do it. But yeah, that was always definitely part of the plan. Like, the atmosphere and vibe has to feel trapped, and some of that is. We were asked a question in another interview, and I brought up sort of something that I don't want to demystify too much, but just that a big portion of this film, which centers around this sort of this idea of pregnancy and rebirth, that the house itself needed to feel almost like a womb for Lily. So this idea of this claustrophobic house that has banging sounds that you can't quite place, that are just on the outside of it. And all these things that are happening that are confusing, and it gets tighter and tighter and more confined as the movie goes on. That this whole idea of Lily going through this sort of reconciliation journey for herself is this like idea of rebirth. So like this idea is that this town, this whole, and then even more so her house, is this contained sort of almost like pregnancy in of itself. So the idea of it being really contained has always been sort of on the forefront. I really wanted it to feel. I wanted, yes, all the rest of the people feel trapped in this town, but she needs to. So she's the most trapped.
Well, so maybe as like sometimes that in my other episodes when it's maybe contained to a specific movie where you are going to talk about spoilers, which we're not in this case, you might at the end sort of talk about the film as a whole, and maybe if you were going to do, describe this to someone as, pretending you're like not in the film and you're just describing like what this is to someone who might want to see it, and sort of how it relates to other film that maybe you don't have to necessarily compare it to other films, but like how would you, what's the word I'm thinking of? How would you describe it to someone, like in the crudest sense? If it's hard to take yourself away because you're in the movie and you wrote the movie and directed it, so it's a hard thing to do maybe. But I'm curious how you would, pitch it to someone as, you should, go check out Lilly Lives Alone, this weekend, kind of thing.
You guys want to start, or do you want?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if I were being, I guess it depends on how much time I had with that person. But if it was like a very like a fast, like
Elevator.
Yeah, I'm in the elevator. Yeah, it would be a really like an exploration It's like I feel like I'm at risk of repeating something that we've said in past interviews, but I feel like it's just so apt, like just the right way to invite people to experience this film, and that is having the opportunity to really go on a journey inside of a character, like with the character. And even though they're not making the right choices all of the time, I mean, how can we say like what is right or not right? But that we experience empathy for them. So maybe they're doing some things that we're like, oh man, you're being your own worst enemy right now. But because we're so in their triggers, we understand a little bit like why those things are unraveling in the way that they are. It's like that sort of like watching um, a train wreck, I guess.
Didn't somebody didn't one of the reviews say like a fever dream?
Fever
I
dream.
think.
I actually love that description. Yeah, like a fever dream, but
I definitely for me like I agree with that. But like I think it's just it's so visually beautiful and haunting in like a good way. So for someone who likes surrealistic imagery and exploring psychological themes in a surrealistic haunting landscape, um, then it's a definitely a film for you. Um, yeah, without giving, I don't know what would you say, Martin.
yeah, okay,
Martin's eyes are like, what?
I'm like, yeah, it's hard to sum it up in one thing. It's like I've got this as like a soundbite. It's like it's essentially a ghost movie, but it's a movie about kinds of ghosts for me. And one is the sort of the ghosts that are like memories or things that you carry with you, things that actually personally haunt you. And I kind of like see like almost no difference between like a lot of the intrusive thoughts I have as a person, and things that sort of keep me up at night feel like ghosts that kind of follow me around. So these like ideas of things you can't quite escape. And then the other kind of ghost, which is just the literal ghost, because it is a ghost movie, and so it's really a movie about a person who's being haunted in more ways than one. And
that's good. That's good, Martin.
okay, stick with that.
Yeah, let me write this down.
Yeah.
One of the things we wanted to do was I wanted to do was make a film that discussed really interesting ideas, but wasn't something I had seen before. So it is in a lot of ways, I think, unique and kind of hard to pin down. It's really a film that you feel rather than sort of verbalize. So definitely interested in seeing how people absorb it.
Yeah, it's interesting you said you mentioned Ghost Story a few times. Is I think when I originally saw it at the Brooklyn Horror, there's like a very small description, and I wouldn't have maybe told someone that it is a ghost story necessarily, but it is a lot of different kinds of films kind of like wrapped in one. It's sort of like psychological aspect, there's like the horror aspect, the ghost aspect. It's so many different things that it kind of hits a bunch of different buttons, so I think it's anyone who has enjoyable of all these kind of different areas, I think would find it, a great watch.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Shannon, Ryan, and Martin, greatly appreciate you coming on
Thanks
Left
so
of
much.
the Projector. And and maybe Martin, we want to remind everyone, I think it'll already be out when they may listen to this, but just in case, do you want to tell everyone where they can watch the movie, where they can find it, those kind of things?
So we'll be in select theaters on August 22nd and day of date, video on demand, and you can follow along with Dark Sky Films to learn more about it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and we will catch you all next time.
Awesome.
Thank you. All right.